Hello, Paulina.
Good morning.
Yes, for the listeners, it is early morning in Leipzig and Copenhagen when we record
Yes.
this podcast. Paulina, we had was it like a 2-week break now because I've been on
Yes.
vacation and you've been moving?
So we basically had the most different experience in the last 2 weeks possible.
Exactly.
You just laying on the beach in Thailand, slurping margaritas, and I'm like hustling and moving boxes and unpacking it.
But the most important thing is, did you get the move done?
Yes, we did. And we were very grateful for the people who moved all of our boxes within just 5 hours. It was very impressive to watch. How quickly they empty 11 years of life out of one apartment and put it in another. And then they simply dropped all of that stuff in our apartment, and we were stuck with that. for 2 days we couldn't move like at all because it was just, I have so many books, right? I have about 1,000 books, and you can't pack all of the books in one box, obviously. So I had 35 boxes that were full of books and then clothes. So that's 35 boxes alone, and then the rest of the stuff obviously were in other boxes. So there was just so much boxes everywhere. And then it was like, do you know this child game where you're not allowed to touch the floor? And it kind of felt like
Yes.
that.
And how is the new apartment? Is it good?
Yes. It's really beautiful. We have the most amazing view, and slowly but surely things are now getting together. And I guess in about a month or so, we might have everything squared off. That's
So the learning here is that even though you guys had to move, it wasn't all that bad. Sometimes change is good.
Yes, and absolutely. Change is good. But the other learning is I definitely hate moving. And the third learning, I'm not 28 anymore. So the move was a lot more exhausting than the last one, which happened so many years ago.
So many years ago. Okay, are we ready to record today's episode?
Let's do it. Let's hear the monster.
Let's do it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to
Cultures from Hell.
I'm your host, Lars, and today we are talking about what really happens to culture during a downturn. And this is not the LinkedIn version, this is the real one. Because when fear enters the room, leadership changes, decision change, priorities shift, and sometimes without anyone meaning to. I'm going to do this over again. Shit. Hello, everybody, and welcome to
Cultures from Hell.
I'm your host, Lars, and today we are talking about what really happens to culture during a downturn. And this is not going to be the LinkedIn version. This is going to be the real one. Because when fear enters the room, leadership changes, decision change, priorities shifts, and sometimes without anyone meaning to, culture collapses. With me today, as always, is Paulina, co-founder of Culture Code Foundation and the co-host of the show. And she's going to help me to unpack how economic pressure reshapes leadership behavior and how to prevent long-term cultural damage. And by that, let's get into it. Are you ready, Paulina?
Absolutely. It's been 2 weeks. Let's go.
Yeah, we have so much energy now.
Let's see if
Paulina,
this is going to become another two-part episode because we get off topic.
oh, it wouldn't surprise me.
Nah, me neither. And I guess also not our listeners.
Okay, Paulina, when you hear the word downturn, what leadership behavior comes to mind?
Contraction. And by that, I mean emotional contraction. Leaders will narrow their lens, especially C-level, and they usually tend to move from how do we build to how do we survive. And survive is always also comes with protection, and protection mode changes behavior extremely fast. I think we've talked about the effects of anxiety on our human brain, where we shift into a more automatic responses, which are fight, flight, and freeze. And that is also what in part plays into this here. And that leads to conversations getting shorter, decisions getting faster and less thought through, listening drops, and overall the behavior tends to be very, very reactive. And I've actually rarely seen a CEO really sit there and consciously say, let me become more controlling. It's not a conscious choice. It's unconscious, fear-driven. The nervous system takes over, the ancient parts of our brain takes over, and then control masquerades as responsibility.
And I think that's a very good point. Just to avoid that we don't get into like a 2, maybe even 3-part episodes. I'm not going to tell my whole life story on this one, but I remember like back in like 2008, I was a self-employed real estate agent, and we had a big crisis back then, and I lost everything plus a couple of million kroners. And I did in the aftermath of all this, I did so many stupid decisions that just dug me into a deeper hole than I was already in. And this, like you're saying, it was fear driven, because I didn't think because everything is out of control. You're desperate to get out of that hole again. So I can really relate to what you're saying here.
And it's such it's really difficult to get out of it because it is automatic, right? So prefrontal cortex actually shuts down, which is the part of our brain that drives rational decisions. So our rationale is literally offline, and we are driven by very basic reaction modes that don't really fit the kind of life we're leading, because you can't run away from an economic crisis like that, like you did from a saber-toothed tiger, right? So it's just in that sense, we really haven't adapted to our modern reality.
Uh-huh. And again, I can somewhat relate to everything you're saying. Maybe that's another episode. We have so many things we're going to do in other episodes. We have to start writing them down.
I think so. Yeah, I was just about to say we need to write it down now.
And and again, speaking of like my own experience, how does economic fear shape leadership behavior?
It can obviously differ, right? So there are people who handle the situation differently, but in most cases, especially when there are multiple employees involved, what I see very often are 3 things that are shifting almost immediately, and again, automatically. Communication becomes guarded because leaders think they need to protect people from the reality, so they watch out more for what they talk about. And this is going to take me off rail. So not going there. Decision making, that second part, decision making centralizes usually. So people get less empowered. People get the feeling that they are being micromanaged more because decision making runs more into higher levels of hierarchy. And the third thing is that trust erodes quietly, but very, very, very quickly, usually because of the first things that I've mentioned. And the most common overcorrection I see is definitely hands down control. And in practicality, that looks like more approvals required because you want to make sure that every decision is done absolutely right and that there is as little potential for failure or mistake. Then you see budget freezes without explanation. By the way, if your company freezes your travel budget, you already know that you're in trouble. That's hands down, that's one of the biggest signs that there are things happening in the background. Just from my experience, that was always the starting point of severe economic downturn in the company. Then what control looks like, leadership stepping into operational details that they haven't touched in years, again, moving into micromanagement mode, and a lot of asking for constant updates on numbers and information just to be safe. You see that a lot in sales. I think I've mentioned before that I've worked in companies in difficult times where there were about 4 or 5 forecast meetings a week because they just really wanted to be on top of every single thing within the sales process, which also tends to be a sign that things are going south. The irony here is the more leaders tighten their grip, the more insecure the entire organization becomes. And then people fall into the fear zone and into anxiety mode. And what's going to happen then? They're going to start protecting themselves, not the company, because it's about themselves now.
That's back to like what you're saying, like the primal instincts
Exactly.
that kicks in, right?
Exactly.
Which I think everybody can relate to. That this is what happens if you get like pressured a lot.
Yeah.
And what does like cultural prioritization under pressure mean?
I see a lot that in good times, leaders and C-levels say that culture matters. And it's in the bad times where we see if that holds true and if leaders and C-levels actually follow through on this narrative. Under economic pressure, leaders tend to prioritize liquidity, optics for the board, especially when you're run by private equity, and quarterly survival. So again, that is usually those are very short-term things. This is not long-term thinking. We are not on a strategic level anymore. We are not on we have the long future ahead in mind, but we are in reaction mode. We need to fix things now, quickly, right? And when you have this short-term focus, culture usually doesn't get explicitly cut. It just silently slides, right? So nobody would ever say, we are deprioritizing trust in this company. But that's only offsites, team events are getting cancelled, feedback processes are being paused or cancelled, appreciation disappears, development budgets freeze. All of that usually is one of the first reactions. So saving money on all the things that help people grow and help, and that is supposed to help them grow together as well as human beings, right? And thereby, and by the micromanagement tendencies and overarching insecurity, you usually see as the first cultural elements to go psychological safety. Absolutely. Then the cross-functional collaboration. Again, people are now in anxiety mode. They want to protect themselves. They maybe protect the people in their own team because they are my closest allies in this business. So cross-functional collaboration goes downhill, and definitely long-term talent investment. I think we've seen that last one in real life, Lars, you and I, in the company that when where we witnessed, unfortunately, this huge layoff together. And there was this one brilliant engineer who was vital to the product, and he had wanted to raise for quite a while. Not a massive one, actually, quite a humble raise, but and he knew that he could earn twice as much as he made at this company somewhere else. But he said, I like the company, I want to work here, I like the product, la di la di la. But they said, no, we're not paying him the money. We don't have the money to give him a raise. And so he left. And the entire product took a huge hit because of him leaving. So that's what I mean by long-term talent investment. That's being cut out or cut off, right?
Yeah. And if someone wanted to destroy trust fast during a downturn, how would they go about it?
Oh, that's so easy. That is so easy. Blame a specific department publicly. Usually that tends to be sales, because they didn't deliver on the numbers or they didn't grow fast enough or whatever. But blame a department publicly, communicate late, and make decisions behind closed doors. And and the last one, that one's nice. Say, we're a family, and we're gonna stick together in these hard times, and then cut people over email. Or a big town hall announcement saying, okay, you have an email in your, if you're allowed to stay, you don't have an email in your inbox now, and if you have to leave, you have that email. I think we've all seen it, right? And again, I've seen sales getting blamed a lot, not necessarily publicly, but internally. Like that, then you start hearing rumors. Yeah, didn't you see sales didn't hit the numbers in the last quarter? So those. I've also seen, and you've been part of that one. We've seen acquired teams scapegoated after mergers, so that then the original crew would say, "Hey, if we hadn't spent the money for acquiring that team or that company, then we wouldn't be in this mess in the first place." And both situations, say one department or an acquired company or whatever, all of that leads to internal frictions. You get an us versus them mentality. And once that happens, cultural recovery becomes 10 times harder.
And I think this is something a lot of people, again, back to you're reacting very primal, right? And you can't see that even though that you're in the middle of a shit show right here, right now, you still have to think long term. Because as soon as you turn that negativity around, if you're not thinking long term, then you're actually behind.
Exactly. And if leaders don't show this kind of behavior, how should I seize learn this kind of behavior, right? So if the head is being headless, then the body is going to be headless as well. It's just
Exactly.
I think this is just role modeling in the worst sense of the word, and I
And
mean,
now,
I
Paulina,
yeah.
you spoke about like the short term damage, right? What
Mm-hmm.
about what long term damages? What long term damages happen when you're going through this process?
Well, that often shows up about 12 to 18 months later, right? Most downturns that we've seen in recent history passes quite quickly, and revenue tends to stabilize for most companies after about a year. Sometimes shorter, sometimes it takes a bit longer. But your best people are gone because either you laid them off because they were too expensive, or they left because they were like, what the heck is going on here? No, I'm not going to be part of that. You're going to have your middle managers burnt out. Your innovation levels will have dropped, and risk tolerance has collapsed, and resilience thereby also has collapsed. This is actually not me seeing that from my own experience. This is backed up by research and by science. So there was a huge study by Wayne Casco over multiple decades that actually showed that layoffs rarely improve long-term financial performance. In many cases, stock price bonds for companies that are actually listed on the stock market, right, are very short-lived, and the productivity drops because of what's called the survivor syndrome, have significant impact on financial revenue, on the financial stability of the company, right? Because the survivor syndrome comes with anxiety, with the reduced loyalty, the low engagement. And we've talked about not just anxiety, but how reduced loyalty and low engagement actually affect the overall financial sanity of any business. On top of that, a Stanford research has actually shown that layoffs increase voluntary turnover among high performers. So the people you most need to rebuild, they are going to be the first ones leaving the ship. And on top of all of that, obviously, if you have layoffs, you usually have to pay leaver packages, garden leave, etc., etc. So, and especially in Germany, I don't know the workloads in Denmark too well, but in Germany, you usually put people on garden leave for around about 3 months, sometimes even longer, where you're paying them, where you're paying the full salary, but you don't have their workforce at all. So it's a double negative for the business. And on top of that, you pay leaver packages because you don't want them to take you to court, la di la di la. So there is a lot of financial investment in the layoff. So even the short-term reality of layoffs doesn't necessarily improve your bottom line, right? So it's really incredible how this short-term thinking affects leadership and boards and investors to look at overall costs of such a measurement. Yeah. What I also see is that middle management suffers most throughout layoffs and the build-up phase after that, because they are expected to enforce decisions that they didn't get to make or even influence. They absorb the emotional backlash from the people that are staying, from the survivors. And usually, or very often, they don't get any support from C-level leadership. And since middle managers are such an important link and they suffer so much, the psychological safety collapses for them. and also for the entire teams. People stop disagreeing, meetings get calmer, and you just you can really sense that fear of making mistakes. I've also seen companies where employees then spend hours and hours and hours just documenting what they did, just to make sure that they were untouchable, because they made sure that everything that they did was in line with the newest order of the day, and to really document all of that. And obviously, if people spend that time on that, they can't spend it on actually doing their job in the best way possible. So it's entire circle of shit.
Yeah, you used that term like double negative before, right? I
Yes.
would say that what you just explained, it actually turns into a triple negative, right? Because all the employees also like want to survive, and they want to be the one that gets noticed, and so on and so on, right?
Absolutely.
Paulina, you said earlier that that you and I have tried some of these things in a company where we worked together, right? You must have like a ton of stories, either from your personal experience or from working with the Culture Code Foundation. Please share a story with our listeners.
I think I already mentioned parts of that. So I worked with companies post-merger that then got into financial trouble, and they decided to lay off about 30% of the workforce. And leadership actually, in this case, leadership actually openly blamed the acquired company for their financial strain, and formed an entire narrative saying they are the reason that we are in trouble, which is absurd on so many levels, because they acquired that company. So if the company that they acquired was responsible for their financial strain, then obviously they made a huge strategic mistake that they did not own, right? So they completely outplaced the blame. And it's actually a funny, it's a funny mechanism, because I think it's called deflection. And I think it's something that we see quite frequently in our current political climate, where you just, you put the blame out there so that nobody can blame you. And in this case, it was just so horrendously obvious, at least from an outside perspective, because they made the decision to acquire the company. And but it worked, right? So the original workforce, they completely stopped collaborating with the acquired workforce. People hoarded information, and then from the acquired company, talent left in like flocks and flocks and flocks. And I think it was as much as 90% of the acquired workforce that left within 4 or 5 months. So the company financially survived this, but the cultural shock to the core was insane. And by acting the way they did, and have they actually exacerbated this talent move from the acquired company, which then led to the fact that there was nobody who knew the product anymore. There was nobody who could take care of the customers from the acquired company, and then the customers left, la di la di la, and after 12 months, I think, they had to shut down the product that they had acquired 12 months ago. So they literally blew the entire money that they'd spent to acquire this specific company for nothing, because the product was dead, the talent was gone. So it was a complete disaster, and culturally, it took a long time to repair that. Not just because the people were gone from the acquired company, but even the people that stayed, they had learned, they had seen in action, okay, people get blamed here, people get pushed out. We don't really take into consideration what happens to them, la-di-la-di-la, all of that, right? And watching that really made me so angry because it was so avoidable. It would have been so avoidable. The fear, obviously, on the management level was real. And I get that. I can completely relate with that. But the reaction was just immature and frankly, strategically stupid.
And I'm not gonna elaborate on that. I had left the company by then when it like really took that.
Yeah, that's what I said, right? People who like you, they leave companies when
Yeah,
such a situation
and
hits.
Paulina, I would imagine there's a lot of like myth about like crisis leadership.
Mm-hmm.
What are some myths or one myth that you'd like to challenge here?
Yeah, one of my favorite ones are tough times require tough leaders. I think we see this myth being lived out very far and wide these days, unfortunately. And it confuses urgency and panic. Urgency in my book says we need to move faster, and panic says only I can fix this, and I'm going to do things in my way because that's the only way that's going to lead to any results. And another myth that I also see is that transparency creates panic. And I am convinced, I'm absolutely convinced from my own experiences, from what I've seen in my work with Culture Code Foundation, it is actually ambiguity that creates panic, not transparency. When leaders don't speak up or don't speak up transparently, people will automatically fill the gaps in communication with their own worst case scenarios that live rent free in their heads. And you were actually the one that taught me that. And I think I've told the story before. The company where we worked at, when we were acquired, I was really, really nervous about this acquisition. Because we had such a strong culture and we all loved our company so much that we were all of us, I think, were really afraid what was going to happen after the merger. And I was on the ship of, I have to celebrate all of this. I have to be the poster girl for this is good news. This brings a bright future for us. And you told me, Paulina, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I can tell that you're not being 100% authentic with us. So let's please be real with us so that and then we had a really, really great conversation as a team about the entire situation. And that did not, I believe it helped all of you, but it definitely helped myself to process my own emotions around this and not just to be forced. I mean, nobody forced me to be this poster girl, but I just did that to myself. It was my own belief, right? And it helped all of you to see, okay, there is risks, but there's also opportunity here. And those things are things that we will have to accept. And those are the things that we can control and influence. And overall, this was incredibly valuable advice, and just goes to show that you were all being, I wouldn't say you were panicking, but you were uneasy because of me not being fully transparent. And I mean, it wasn't being transparent about facts, right? So let me be very clear on this. You don't just have to be transparent about facts. Because I think I always were transparent about the facts, but I wasn't transparent and I wasn't authentic about my own feelings towards the situation and my own fears. And if leaders share their own fears around any difficult situation, then this can help people bond so much more than this toxic positivity or fake positivity.
And I have a pretty well evolved BS detector, so I can smell that a long way before when people are trying to like go that way. I remember like again like I told earlier here in this episode that back in 2008 I was a self-employed real estate agent, and I remember that one of the first people I worked for in the real estate industry, he told me that when you have a showing of an apartment or of a house, no matter how bad it is, you always start with something positive, then you tell all the negative, and you have to be honest, and then you end up with something positive, because that's what people's going to leave with at the end. And that's actually something I've stuck to a long time. Like, so if you're in a bad position, like you were at that time, right?
Yeah.
Then just be upfront and honest about it. Just tell everything. But then, of course, try to spin it to something positive. Don't lie about anything. But there's always a positive aspect of everything in life. Like, no matter how bad it looks, there's always positive aspects.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
So for me, that's always how I would look at crisis. I would be honest to myself, be honest with the people around me, but I'll always try to find a positive aspect of it and focus on that afterwards.
I really like that. And I know that you say you have an advanced BS detector. And I know that should be true. At the same time, I'm convinced that everyone has a good inkling if the people that are important to their career and therefore a very important aspect of their life, if they're being authentic or not.
Yeah.
So it might not be as highly skilled as your BS detector, but I mean, you have seen everything in your life. You've done everything. You've seen everything. But almost anyone I know has some sort of BS detector, which is also down to our animal brains that just helps us to detect if we are in an environment that's going to hurt us or support us or keep us safe.
100%. Paulina, we are about 40 minutes into this episode now, and we're only like halfway through the agenda of today. So let's do our listeners a favor and cut this into a 2-part episode. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely. I was going to suggest the exact same thing. I think this is a good point to take it up next week.
Okay, cool. So before we cut off from this episode, please tell our listeners, like, where can they find you? Where can they find the Culture Code Foundation? How can they reach out to you if they have any questions about comedy cultures, and also if they want to be a guest here on the show, or just have us tell the story?
Which is basically probably the most important part of that, because yes, to all of our listeners out there, we would love to hear your stories live on the show, or we can also have a very anonymous conversation beforehand, just the three of us, and then Lars and I will re-narrate your story here. So we would love to hear what you've seen in terms of amazing cultures or bad cultures. So reach out to us either on LinkedIn or on Instagram. We are going to link all the social media handles in the show notes. And if you are interested in working with the Culture Code Foundation, you can also find us at culturecodefoundation.com. So I think that's the most important information on
Yeah,
how
and
to
if they didn't listen
find
to
it.
anything, you had to say again, we are going to link to everything. So
Yeah.
just click the link and reach out to us if you have anything. And again, if you have a company that are struggling somehow, back to the topic of today's episode, reach out to Paulina, hands down. Trust me, she has seen it all. She has tried it all. She can help you get out on the other side as well.
Thank you, Lars, for that high praise.
Okay, Paulina, thank you very much. And to all our listeners, we will see you next week.
And thank you all for listening. Bye, Lars.